Welcome in, everybody. We made it to week 17. Always kind of a bittersweet time of the year where, in the Packers' case, you're gearing up for the playoffs, have a really big week 17 matchup against the Chicago Bears. But at the same time, you're wondering just how in the hell did the season go that fast? Our last NFL red zone of the season. I think we're heading into a really exciting wild card weekend where we're going to get 6 really good football games. So I'm really excited about that. But it's tough not to be, look back and be a little bit bummed always in week 17 and just wonder, where the hell did the season go? How quickly it went. But kudos to the NFL. For making it through a 17-week season. Yes, there have been some postponements. Yes, there's been some questionable decision making. Yes, the Broncos had to play a game legitimately without any quarterbacks active. But when when I was asked to talk about the beginning of the season and how the season would go, never in my wildest imagination would I have expected that the NFL was going to be able to make it through a 17-week season with no canceled games, without having to add a week some point in the season. And I think at some point you have to give credit to the NFL. Yes, there's been some COVID exposures. There's been a lot over the course of this last couple weeks. The Saints are in a tough position going into this last week 17. There's a couple players, key players that are going to go into potentially wild card weekend that, we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on depending on what teams are playing and things like that. But for the most part, I think the NFL deserves a lot of credit for being able to get through a season without any major issues, without having to cancel any games, add any weeks, and really get to the wild card weekend with no major blips in the radar. Was it perfect? No, but a million times better than I ever would have expected it to be. So kudos to the NFL. I'm glad it happened. Like I said, it seems crazy that it's already week 17. I'm excited for the Packers playing a really big matchup against the Chicago Bears. I think this is going to be a really entertaining week 17. I think it's only like 4 games this week that have no implications whatsoever, where there's just nothing on the line for either of the teams, which usually you get to this weekend, maybe like half the games are basically glorified preseason games. So the fact that there's only 4 is impressive. And I think it's just been overall a fairly competitive season throughout the league. So it's been fun. I'm excited to see how the season wraps up and what the playoff matchups are. But we've got a lot to discuss here today still as we kind of look at this Packers-Bears matchup in week 17. Obviously, a ton of playoff implications. Let's start off with the injury report for Green Bay. Outside of, that David Bakhtiari torn ACL, no big deal, right? Outside of that, the Packers are relatively healthy going into this game. Kingsley Keke is going to be out for this game with a concussion. Simon Stepaniak is questionable for this game. My guess is he probably doesn't dress, but we'll kind of see there. But really, they're getting Rick Wagner back, Jay Sternberger back, Will Redmond. His concussion issues have subsided. Jamal Williams is back. So outside of the players that are on IR, it looks like it's just going to be Kingsley Keke and Simon Stepaniak who are out for this game. So again, David Bakhtiari, obviously the huge rain cloud over everyone's head here, but outside of that, David Bakhtiari has been placed on IR now, the injury list looks fairly palatable. Another, kind of interesting, news or notes or, people have been asking about is, will Snacks Harrison play in this game? And nobody knows at this point. He's obviously not in the injury report. He should be available to play if they want him to. So my guess is he's active and he's going to play a few snaps in this game. Nobody knows for sure at this point, but that'll be another on the kind of inactives list to kind of keep an eye out for, and if he's actually active for this game or not. So let's go over some roster moves from Saturday that the Packers made. So first of all, David Bakhtiari, in fact, placed on IR. So that's obviously expected, and he's, of course, going to miss this season and probably some of the start of next season as well. Hopefully he's back sooner than that, but, my expectation would probably be that he's going to at least miss the first quarter of next year. We'll see. They signed Ben Braden to the active roster, so he's going to take David Bakhtiari's position on the 53-man roster. Brian Price was elevated for game day. As I mentioned in my defensive grades, really liked what Brian Price put on tape. Showed some flash, showed a little sizzle. I was able to get into the backfield, just looked energetic and looked like he had fresh legs. And sometimes at this point in the season, those fresh legs can pay dividends. Really liked what he brought to the table last week. I think it was literally 9 snaps, so let's pump the brakes a little bit. I'm not overly excited here, but I did like what he put on tape this past week. And then Anthony Rush, who they released to get Snacks Harrison, nice news. They were able to get him back on the practice squad. So that was some good news as well, that they kind of just keep that depth there with bringing in Snacks and actually not losing Anthony Rush either. So kind of a win-win situation there. As for the Chicago Bears, two key injuries in their secondary, both Buster Skrine and Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson's had a fantastic rookie season. Their number 2 corner, their number 3 corner, and Buster Skrine in their slot corner, both going to be out for this game. Really the only other injury that I think is going to be worth keeping an eye on, Deion Bush missed practice early in the week, was limited still late in the week, was listed as questionable. I think, that's a true questionable. I'd expect all of their other players listed on their injury report are going to play just based on their practice status. But I think, again, Buster Skrine, Jalen Johnson both out, Deion Bush their safety. So again, you start adding up players in the secondary here. Deion Bush will kind of be the one to keep an eye on as the inactives come out on Sunday. They did also add Xavier Crawford to their active roster. He's a defensive back, so that may give some credence to the fact that maybe Deion Bush won't play, but either way, with Buster Skrine and Jalen Johnson, they probably needed another defensive back, so Xavier Crawford gets the call up from the Bears this week. All right, let's go over the keys to this game for both the Bears and the Packers. And I want to start off with number 1. And if you remember back last year, there was a quote from Tramon Williams, and when they, thought that, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm probably butchering this, but when they thought that they were going to be able to beat the Bears, and it was basically something like, as soon as we knew that, Mitch Trubisky was playing and that they were going to make Mitch Trubisky beat them, that's when you kind of had a feeling they were going to win. It's the same thing here, right? You have to let Mitch Trubisky beat you. And I know he's put in some better games as of late, but he's still going to make a couple boneheaded decisions. And let's not pretend that the games that he's recently won haven't been against terrible defenses, Jacksonville, Minnesota, Detroit, etc. So there have been some really, really bad defenses, especially pass defenses that he's faced. And even in those games, made some really poor decisions with the football still, even though he's played much better. So I think you have to still make Mitch Trubisky beat you. And Jake Morley of the Pack a Day podcast, got to shout that out, he brought up this great statistic. Mitch Trubisky is 4 of 29 on passes 20-plus yards downfield this season. 4 of 29. That's a 24.1 QB rating and 38th overall in the NFL. Only 13.8% of those passes, 20 yards or more, were actually deemed catchable. That's dead last in the NFL. I'm assuming he got these from Pro Football Focus, but I'm not 100% sure. His point was make Trubisky play quarterback, and that's 1,000,000% the right way to go. You can't let David Montgomery beat you. You want to limit their short passing game, and you want to make Mitch Trubisky beat you downfield. You also want to make sure that Mitch Trubisky doesn't beat you with his legs. So that is going to be a huge key in this game, making Mitch Trubisky beat you with his arm, more specifically. Not just beat you running around and making plays, make him beat you with his arm and make you beat him with his arm downfield. So I think that is going to be key number 1 to this game. If you put this game in Mitch Trubisky's hands, I love the Packers' chances. You can't let David Montgomery get going. You can't give him easy passes to Allen Robinson and that wide receiver core, Anthony Miller, Darnell Mooney. You got to make sure that he's putting the ball downfield and giving your corners a chance and your safeties a chance, which, as I mentioned, has been the safeties specifically a strength of this team as of late. Number 2, I think you've got to establish that quick passing game for the Packers, and I think you have to establish an early lead. And what I mean here is, with the loss of David Bakhtiari, Green Bay is going to run their same similar offense, and it is a really difficult offense to beat right now. So you're looking at Devontae Adams on the outside. What do you want to do? All right, do you want to play off of him? Aaron Rodgers is going to take those little pop passes, and Devontae Adams is going to pick up at minimum, 5-6 yards? So those are just going to paper cut you to death. So you got to play up on him. Are you going to play him in man? Are you going to play him in zone? Because either way, if you're up on him one-on-one and there's no safety over the top, they're just going to run those slot fades and those slant plays, and your corner is in no man's land. And that's a play that Rodgers and Devontae Adams can beat you on. And Rodgers doesn't need, a 7-step drop to complete some of those passes, because they're so it's just precision from those two on that specific play. So how do you want to play that? So now you're going to double Devontae. All right, now you've got access to the running game. But I think you also have to make sure that you're establishing and stretching this Bears defense, using some of that jet motion, whether it be with Tavon Austin or other receivers, some reverses, keep them off guard. You have to develop a competent screen game. The Packers haven't been great in the screen game. I think they're going to have to, pull off a couple of really nice screen games just to get Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, those guys off the scent a little bit. I think you're going to have to develop the running game a little bit. And the reason I say this is you don't want to have to get into a situation where you're one-dimensional, you're just passing the football. Akeem Hicks is dominating the middle, you're not getting that run game going. And I think if the Bears can get you in a situation where you're playing a lot of 11 personnel and you're going back 5-7 step drops, that's when Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Robert Quinn, and that Bears defense can start attacking those offensive tackles. No David Bakhtiari, start attacking Lucas Patrick, and that's where you can run into problems. And that's why, again, I mentioned that getting that early lead is going to be important. Even if they're down by a field goal, as long as it's close, Green Bay can continue to run their offense. But the worst case scenario is the Bears get up early and you have to start playing that 11 personnel. You're basically almost taking away all of those advantages that you have in Matt LaFleur's system. The Bears just play pass. They don't care if you're running. And Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, Robert Quinn are just teeing off on the quarterback. That's where that depth along the offensive line starts being an issue. That's where you don't want to be. So I think establishing that quick passing game, getting some of those bubble screens to the running back, some of those easy plays for Aaron Rodgers in the offense, that's going to be key to this game, and establishing that early lead so you don't get in that situation where you're playing from behind and letting Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks tee off. And number 3 is hammer the right side of that Bears offensive line, whether it's Sam Mustipher, which I think is the planet where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker far. I think that was Mustafar, but we're going Sam Mustipher here at center, Alex Bars at right guard, Jermaine Ifedi at right tackle. That is a major weakness for this Bears offense, and you have to pound that right side, whether it's Kenny Clark, whether it's Darius Smith, Rashawn Gary, who's ever on that side on any given play, they've got to be the ones that are setting the edge, getting pressure, making sure that David Montgomery is not having success running to that side of the field. That is where you can win. We know if Jimmy Graham's in there, he's not going to help as a blocker, so they have a very weak side of their offensive line, and I would expect a lot of Zadarius Smith and Kenny Clark lined up and hedging on the left side of the defense to take advantage of that right side of the Bears offensive line. It's going to be a really fun game, and I'm really looking forward to this Week 17, seeing where the playoff matchups end up. I think this is going to be a closer game than when the Packers and Bears played earlier this year. I think the Bears come in with a lot of confidence, and they have a ton to play for. Not that Green Bay doesn't. That number 1 seed is huge, but this is a team where, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, Mitch Trubisky, all of their jobs at some point were on the line, and I think Nagy and Pace have saved themselves at this point, but if they go out and lay an egg and the Packers, blow them out, who knows what would happen. But, this is a really big game for the Bears to try to get in the postseason. I know that they could still get in if the Rams lose and the Cardinals win, which is probably likely with John Wofford at quarterback for the Rams, but the Bears know that they're going in this with so much to gain. Mitch Trubisky could legitimately get a new contract if he plays well in this game. So they have a lot to play for, and they're playing in Chicago at home. They're going to give everything and then some. Expect some trick plays. Matt Nagy is not afraid to be aggressive. Watch for fake punts. Watch for fake field goals. They're going to give everything, flea flickers, you name it. They're going to pull out the kitchen sink in this game because they have everything to lose. Really, I would say they have nothing. They have everything to lose, and to an extent, everything to gain. So I think Green Bay, obviously playing for that 1 seed, they're not going to take their foot off the gas. This is going to be one of those all gas, no brakes type of games for Green Bay as well. But I think they have to, come with that energy, come with that passion. No laying an egg in Chicago. Aaron Rodgers has talked so much about wanting that number 1 seed to go through Green Bay. No hangover from the David Bakhtiari injury. Go into this game with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement to make sure that you're playing your home games at Lambeau Field, and more importantly, getting that week off to rest, making it that you've only got 3 games to win the Super Bowl, 2 games to win to get to the Super Bowl. Such a huge game for Green Bay, such a huge game for Chicago. This is what you want to see in Week 17 is some of these really key matchups, and it should be a phenomenal game. I'm going Packers win. Aaron Rodgers has talked all season long about wanting that game to be played at home, home field advantage throughout, making some of these teams come to Lambeau Field. You don't want Drew Brees, having the comforts of the Superdome in any matchups in the playoffs. You want him throwing with his less than stellar arm at Lambeau Field at this point, right? You want Russell Wilson to have to be running around on a slower turf, Lambeau Field. Not that, Seattle's that fast of a turf, but you want him a little bit more uncomfortable at Lambeau Field. Who's ever playing, it doesn't matter. You want it to go through the cold, the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. So I think this game's going to mean a ton to the Packers, and I think they come away with a win. I'm going to say by 3 to 4 points. I think it's going to be close, but I think Green Bay gets that win. enjoy week 17, everyone. It should be a lot of fun. I am looking forward to talking about the game with you tomorrow right here back on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to check out Mike and Gage on today's audio version of the Pack-A-Day podcast where they get you all set for the game as well. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.